Hello and welcome to Hop Along Studio. Today is National Scrapbooking Day, so I wanted to share with you a scrapbooking layout. This is part of the Wild Whisper Designs blog hop, so make sure you check out the other designers and their inspiration that they're sharing today. So let's get started. As part of this blog hop, I was given this sketch by Sarah Scraps to use as a starting point for my scrapbooking page. And I have decided to make some changes to it. You need to realize that the sketches are just a suggestion. They're a great place for you to use as a starting point for adding your embellishments and for adding your photos. So what I liked about this page was the fact that you had the embellishments kind of coming across the page. I liked how the photos were front and center, but I've decided to change it up for my application. So to start with, I'm using this paper, which is actually part of the Where to Next collection from Wild Whisper Designs. And I love this photo paper. I love the blues and the browns and the really fun colors on it. I love how busy it is and how vibrant it is. And because this paper is so vibrant, I decided to use some photos that I took when I was on vacation. And when I go on vacation, it's never just with one camera. This picture here actually shows me using my film, my Polaroid, and my medium format film camera. And I took this picture with a digital camera as well. So photography and vacation go hand in hand. So one thing to think about was I liked the idea of the two pictures, but I didn't necessarily have ones in this format. I wanted to use these pictures. So instead of getting really specific that I had to have landscape photos, instead I used portrait ones. But what I'm using is a 4x3, a 4x6, and another 4x3. And in a sense, when you actually put them together, they kind of give you those two bands. Even though it's a little bit different than this, I think it's really effective. I also noticed that with this one, the pictures are front and center, and I wanted to follow a little bit more closely the rule of thirds. I've spoken about the rule of thirds before. In this case, I used a 12x12 scrapbooking sleeve and I added tape on it. And what this shows is where your third lines are and where you kind of get those sweet spots, which are these four and these two lines here, which are stronger lines for your layout. So I ended up pushing everything a little bit up just so that it kind of followed the design that I was looking for this page. Again, these sketches are a really great starting point. I really like Sarah's sketch, but I really wanted to make it my own. For my 4x6 picture, I'm using a 6 1/4 by 4 1/4 white matte. I was just using Staples white cardstock for this step. And so that's going to add a little bit of a frame on these pictures. When you're dealing with such busy backgrounds, it's really important to make sure that you have your pictures pop, whether that is adding mattes to them or adding different layers. It's important just to have them come to the forefront of your page. So I decided to use a few other papers from the Where to Next collection. We have the postage stamps, the more leather paper, and then also this photos paper. There's actually sentiments on the other side, and I just took a strip of it. And I love that photos are a return ticket to a moment otherwise gone. Where to Next, and it has other sayings on it that I really like. So I actually have already cut these down to size. Often when I'm working on a sketch or I'm working on a page, I will just take white pieces of just copy paper and cut them in different sizes, slide them in behind my pictures to figure out if they kind of fit where I want them to be before I cut all my nice pattern paper, because it can be really painful if you cut it the wrong size and you don't have another sheet. So I had cut this one to 8 inches by 8.5 inches. And this one is 6.5 inches by 8.5 inches. And so what I decided to do here is I want these to be in behind and then with my paper, my photos on top. And I'll mess around a little bit with this as I go. And actually, before I go any further, I'm going to take a quick moment just to adhere the photos to the photo mats. This is going to make actually shuffling all these layers a little bit easier. So now that I've taped those down, this is going to make it a little bit easier to move these around. I still want to try to keep that same design that I had before, so I'm just going to line those up. And I want this to actually be just over the side there, because I don't necessarily want to have these lined up with my paper, but I do want it to work with the paper really well. And then this piece here is going to come in below here. And this is why you need to fuss around with it a little bit just to get the right overlap of your paper and your embellishments, and make sure that you like the spacing. So I'm trying to still keep this fairly centered. Again, everything's a little off center. And this is the thing, is I've moved from basically a very symmetrical layout, which is why she had everything centered on either side. It's a great layout, but I'm doing everything a little bit less centered and a little bit more rule of thirds with this. And that's totally fine. You don't have to totally follow the rule of thirds with everything. I like it in my layouts, and I'm looking for something a little less symmetrical because of how I want to handle some of my papers in here. So now I've generally figured out where I want some of my layers of paper. I'm just going to adhere them down and then going to start adding my embellishments, my title, and other things on top. So after you've added your layers and added your photos, the next thing you may want to do is figure out your title, because I'm going to add a lot of ephemera and other imagery on this just to kind of follow the sketch for that part of it. And because of that, I want to make sure I had room for my title. And so I wanted to use photography in Parksville because I was wanting to journal about how photography is so much part of our traveling, and more than just taking out our phone and taking pictures, but actually taking time to go for walks and seeing things and having that process of photography. So I really wanted to showcase that in this layout. So when you're actually doing your letters, I ended up stamping out these letters and cutting them out with my brother Scan and Cut. It does save me a lot of time and gives me these consistent borders that I really like. For these actual stamped images, I used both the Road Trip Wild Whisper Design stamp set as well as a brush letter stamp set. And I used both of these with my Misty. That way I was able to kind of get the consistency of color. For both of these I used Color Box ink. I used the pigment for the Parksville and the chalk for the photography. So that again gives it a little bit more variation in the look of my letters. And if you're actually interested in understanding a little bit more about stamping and different ways you can stamp and some of the tips and tricks and techniques I use for stamping, please check out the card just above there. I actually do have a video specifically about stamping tips and tricks to help you get consistent stamping results. And for the in for this one, I actually ended up just using my own writing, putting a little box around it with these sketchy little edges because I thought it matched the sketchy little edges of the little cameras here. And then basically just cut it out. So I'm going to adhere this and then we'll move on to the next step. Now that my title's adhered down, I'm going to be adding a lot of my ephemera and embellishments to this page. So I've decided to use some stamps and paper from the Wild Whisper Designs Where to Next collection for this. I'm actually going to be cutting out both this camera and this camera. For this, I'm just going to basically just cut around it. So I'm fussy cutting the images out and taking off the bit of the card background that we have there. The other thing is the Where to Next has this great stamp set. I love these cameras, and so we're going to be stamping the cameras and making a bunch of duplicates of these images to be added to our page. So with the camera images here, I am going to be using a few different colors of distress ink. I have Cracked Pistachio, Salty Ocean, Mermaid Lagoon, Peacock Feathers, and Evergreen Bow. And the reason I'm choosing the distress inks for this is because they are translucent. The good thing about them is you still keep those really nice black images, but at the same time you end up with color on them. So with these ones, I've decided to go a little bit of a different route with them. I am not getting them perfectly colored for each layer that you see. Like I would usually end up coloring out all the different parts of the camera. In this case, I just want the idea that some of these blues and greens and colors that I have on the paper end up coming through on these embellishments. So I'm going to add some Cracked Pistachio as well because it's a very kind of blue-green teal color. So I'm trying to mix the greens and the blues together. And then I'm going to go to Mermaid Lagoon next, and I'm going to add again a little bit more color. Bring those blues in. Again, this won't be as intense as the background, but it will add color in a really interesting way. I'm going to add again a little bit more Salty Ocean. Actually, I haven't used this color yet. Salty Ocean is next. Just to, again, add a little bit more of the blue in there. Then I'm going to go back in with a little bit more Cracked Pistachio. Get more of that teal color in there. And that's a nice thing with the distress inks. You can layer and layer and layer until you get the color you want. And then now some Evergreen Bow. I think that works pretty well. I think this is going to work quite well with my layout. And so you're just going to want to take a pair of scissors and fussy cut these out, or use a brother scanning cut if you have one, and just cut around these images. And for these cameras, I decided I was going to use pencil crayons actually to color them. So I'm actually using some Caran d'Ache ones that I have. I use any pencil crayons that you have, but these happen to be some of my favorites. I really like the intensity of colors on them. I'm also using a blender pen and a stub. I actually have a few different types. That what's going to help me get the color to be a little more consistent with these. Go in and basically just add a little bit of color down. And I'm following the same pattern of color. I actually refer to the pattern paper to figure out what colors had been used for the images that are already on the background. And I'm just using the side of this. I want to try to get a very soft blend. I don't want any really harsh lines on this. And then just go around the flash. And then I'm also going to go around the viewfinder here. And then I'm going to use the darker teal color to go around the lens. I'm also going to add a little bit of teal to these spots, just to add a little bit of extra color. So what's nice about these little nibs is that you basically just rub them across where you have laid down color, and it's going to make it look more consistent. It's going to basically push the pigment into the paper and give you a lot more consistent, vibrant look to your pencil crayon coloring. So you can actually use the stubs, or you can also use this blender pencil. It basically doesn't have any color to it. It does the same thing, helps get the pigment into the paper. And that's basically how you do that. You want to cut them out. Again, same as the other cameras, and then we'll move on to the next step. So now we're going to add our cameras to the page. So basically, you just want to do them in groups. That's the whole point of this, is to add both the blue and the white ones together, just to add contrast and variety to your layout here. I like having them touching, but they don't necessarily have to cover up the entire background. And trying to vary a little bit of the color based off of which ones you had decided to use. And then even overlapping them on top of the photos also works really well. I like doing groupings because I really feel like it pulls your eye across the page. In this case, I'm doing the groups of the blue cameras with the white camera, and again, I'm angling everything, and some things go in behind, some go over top. And then I feel like this could be good, but I really want to try to follow what Sarah had in her layout here. So again, down and across. So this feels good, but I wanted to actually come across and down and have you read this way. And so it's something to think about, is how would you read one of these layouts? How would you look at them and focus on them if you were seeing them for the first time? And that's basically how I end up kind of coming up with where I want some of my ephemera, just in the way that everything kind of falls with each other. And the last thing I'm going to do with this is just add a little journaling block here, which I'm going to add my own writing to. And this journaling block was basically created using a white piece of paper, and then I drew a line and then another squiggly line over top of it to give it a nice border. But again, there's so many patterns going on here. I didn't want to add another pattern. I wanted it white so I could just add my journaling, and I think it's going to be quite effective that way. So I'm going to paste all these things down, and then we'll move on to the next step. So all my embellishments have now been attached to my page, and I took my Faber-Castell Pip Pen to add my journaling to my page. So the final thing I want to do is use all of these like sequins from Well Whisper Designs. I love this collection. I love how there's all of these different shapes. There's these really shiny ones. There's all of these square ones. It has so much variety in it. And so what I'm going to do is add this to my layout. I'm going to be using some clear glue, and I am going to just attach them in and around some of my cameras. And I hope you like what you've seen here, and it's giving you some inspiration and some ideas. There's so many different ways that we can use embellishments in our scrapbooking, and I think scrapbooking is a wonderful thing. I don't actually do it that much anymore. I've moved a little bit more towards art journaling and painting and other things, but I find that I keep coming back to it because it's so fun. I love being able to record my memories, being able to remember some of these wonderful times I've had. And I know we all have our phones, and there's lots of social media platforms that remind us about some of the things we've done. But I don't know, I personally find that I love being able to actually record these memories and even write down the thoughts I have at that time. I also use traveler's notebooks more than I ever used to before. And that's also been really great for being able to record memories. This glue is going to dry clear, so it's going to work quite well for this. I think the key to this is trying to keep it a little bit on the random side. It's sometimes hard because I find that I like trying to make it all look the same sometimes. And so I have to fight that nature to keep things perfectly symmetrical. And I think that was part of the reason I deviated from Sarah's layout a little bit, is I love the symmetrical layouts. I love what she did with hers. But I really wanted to use this particular set of photos, and I thought going a little bit of a different way with it would work well. And that's something to always remember with these particular sketches. They are suggestions. They're always suggestions. There's a good stepping point where if you have no idea where to start, or you're new to scrapbooking and you're not too sure where to go with it, that's where they're really powerful, because they can really help you figure out what you want to do, what you want to say. And I found that when I was scrapbooking a lot, it wasn't always easy to always come up with fresh ideas. So sometimes you need to rely on others and people who are maybe been doing this a bit longer than you have to be able to help you along to come up with something that you're going to really enjoy and remember and use in the future. A few of those were looking a little bit too similar, so I'm trying to throw in a few different shapes. You can always let them tuck under and above and come up with different ways you can put them. They can be on top of each other. They can be layered. I would love to actually do a scrapbooking page with a shaker element to it. I think I'm going to try that sometime in the future. I think that's all I'm going to add for now. Again, it just adds a little bit of fun throughout this layout, just to add a little bit more variety. So here's our finished layout. I really like that I added the extra matting, the white journal spot, to help kind of balance out for some of the busier papers. And again, I was trying to use a variety of blues, not just stick with just the blue that's in the background. A few weeks ago, I did do a video on how to create a monochromatic project. So you might want to check that out if you want to figure out how to use more of one or two colors in a journaling layout or in a scrapbooking layout that will add variety and interest to your work. I would love for you to check out some of the other designers who have been doing pages for this blog hop. We all ended up using the same layout and did different takes on what we thought this layout should be. You can always check out my website, hopalongstudio.com, where I have lots of ideas on how you can have a creative habit in your own life. I hope you have a really great week, and I will see you next time.